Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am 𝐂𝐀𝐑𝐁𝐎𝐍 𝐓𝐑𝐀𝐾 from Trade Promotion Council of India, and I'm delighted to see you all in today's panel discussion on carbon trade, the climate-proof export opportunity. I would also like to extend a warm welcome to our panelists, Mr. Shailendra Singh Rao, founder, Reduce, an eminent service providing company in the field of climate change and carbon asset management. I would now like to come to Mr. Shailendra Singh for his take on this question. So over to you.
Thank you, 𝐂𝐀𝐑𝐁𝐎𝐍, for inviting me for this such a informative webinar. And thank you, Professor Krishna Raj, for elaborating the nitty-gritties of the carbon credits and the technicalities. So when we talk about carbon credits, I guess a lot of talks have already been happening across the world about carbon credits and carbon markets. A lot of things have been happening globally. But we need to understand the basics of carbon credits, carbon markets, and why carbon credits are basically demanded by the actual end users, and why carbon credits are being developed by the developers, the technical reasons behind it, why carbon credits are claimed. So to understand this, we can understand it in such a manner that one carbon credit is equal to 1,000 kilogram of carbon emission reduction equivalent, CO2 emission reduction equivalent. This has been the base parameter set by UNFCCC under the CDM when the Kyoto Protocol was launched. Now, there are 6 identified greenhouse gases, and the basis of all these gases, CO2 has been considered as a baseline for calculating the carbon credit. So even if you are reducing methane, even if you are abating or reducing PFC, HFC, SFC, any sort of, or N2, any sort of greenhouse gases, every gas has their own hazardous quotient, but this quotient is again compared vis-a-vis the amount of CO2. In the absence of these gases, what could have been the case scenario that is decided? Right. So, for example, if I am an owner, I am a project developer, I have installed wind power or I have installed a solar power plant. So the baseline would be that in absence of my solar power plant or wind power plant, if this much amount of clean energy would not have been generated, this energy would have been generated in a coal-based power plant, and this much amount of emission would have happened. Now, by installing this clean energy power plant, the tax amount of emission my plant has replaced. That means in tune of 1 ton of carbon emission replacement is equal to 1 carbon credit, I will get these tradable permits from a particular registry. Now, it depends which kind of registry I'm going to go for claiming these credits. Now, there are 2 types of markets, as it has been elaborated earlier: compliance market and voluntary market. Compliance market is majorly cap and trade market, the CDM market governed by UNFCCC. Under CDM, you can register your project under clean development mechanism and claim the credits by following all the thorough processes. Another market which comes as voluntary carbon credits market, wherein there are different sort of autonomous voluntary registries, and these autonomous bodies have their own guidelines and parameters. Based on these guidelines and parameters, you need to get a project registered, get it audited, get it verified by approved third-party auditors, and claim the carbon credits from these registries. So you can claim credits from these both compliance and voluntary registry, and then you can sell these credits in the international market. Now, when selling the credits, who are the buyers? Now, these buyers are the obligated bodies, obligated entities, or entities which want to take a climate-friendly action voluntarily. If they want to reduce their emissions to some extent voluntarily, they will go to the market and source voluntary carbon credits against the total emission done by them. So let's say there is a company which has done 50,000 tons of CO2 emission equivalent in a given year under scope 1, 2, and 3, all the processes done by it, and company wishes to achieve carbon neutrality as a part of its goal. The company would go to international market and source these credits from a suitable international project and will deal across. Now, people like carbon traders, they are basically companies like us. We are the carbon originators, developers, and traders. So we source such projects from the market. We develop such projects. We develop carbon credits, and then we talk to these international buyers and we set up a deal between the buyers and the sellers, and we get this deal closed and get the carbon credits transferred from seller's account to buyer account. We help them getting it offsetted and let the buyer claim these credits against its own emission. Vis-a-vis, we help the payment facilitation done from buyer's side to the seller side, and the seller gets benefited with the economic value of these carbon credits. So it is basically a sustainable and economic development and sustainable development's vicious cycle, which keeps going on. Now, under all these mechanisms, be it voluntary market or compliance market, we need to understand the pricing methodology. So carbon credit is basically, whenever an investor, if it is a compliance investor, then in order to avoid its own carbon tax in its respective country, the owner would never want to pay more money in terms of carbon tax. Rather than it would go to the market and source carbon credit and get it offsetted against its own emission. That is a basic process which has been followed since years. But still, we are standing at a juncture wherein carbon pricing is still an issue for many of the buyers across the world, because carbon credit has no fixed price mechanism. Carbon credit has no fixed process by which a pricing can be done in the international market, because carbon credits, moreover, it's a subject matter of, majorly it is a subject matter of bilateral tradings. I am the seller, there is a buyer, and based on the market indicators. Now, these market indicators could be many. The total demand and supply gap of the carbon credits in the market, the total demand, because for all sort of carbon credits, EU ETS, the trading patterns of EU ETS, European Union Emission Trading Scheme, is considered as the base for setting up the pricing of voluntary carbon credits specifically. So largely it works as a base for voluntary carbon credits. So better the EU ETS performing, we can consider that voluntary carbon credits will also be poised to perform better in the market. And if the trading patterns of EU ETS is going down, the international carbon market gets impacted. That's how these indicators work. Secondly, demand supply gap. If there is a more demand of carbon credits and there is a less supply comparatively in the market, so carbon credit prices will likely get increased. And if there is less demand and more supply, oversupply of carbon credits, there the prices will fall down, and which was the case earlier between the period of 2015 to 2020, when the carbon credits prices were slashed drastically due to the very lower demand across the globe. Had there been a fixed price mechanism of carbon credit, I guess the impact would have been less damaging in those times. But gladly, the situations have improved after so many years. So carbon credit pricing is largely a subject matter of bilateral trading. Mostly the prices are set and decided between the buyer and seller mutually, rather than following any particular index, rather than following any particular exchange. There have been a couple of exchanges, but these exchanges again work on the bilateral price trends in the market only. So majorly the price mechanism, there is an absence of a fixed price mechanism in the carbon markets, but carbon credits are priced largely between buyers and sellers. So that's how the trading these days are happening. There have been some talks about the proper legislation and proper framework for a decisive pricing on carbon credits, and all these things are just under discussions. Unless there is some matured, unless something concrete has been set up, I guess bilateral mode of transactions and bilateral mode of price setting will only remain the way for the carbon credits pricing. But there are certain pros and cons of this pricing method as well, because it also caters the urgency. It also largely depends on the urgency of the buyer or urgency of the seller as well. There are instances we come through these instances day in day out, wherein sellers are pushing us for selling their carbon credits at whatever price, because they are in urgent need of grabbing the money. Though we know that carbon credit prices are favorable or not favorable in the market, but if there is a seller push, we are forced to sell it at a lesser price to meet sellers' demand. Sometimes even the urgency is from the buyer side, because buyer needs to fulfill its target as soon as possible, and buyers are not getting the adequate supplies of carbon credits. Therein, buyers sometimes get ready to pay even more premium on the base prices, which is running in the market at that time, in order to get an early delivery of such credits and fulfilling its target. So both sides are there. Sometimes it's a loss for seller, sometimes it's a win-win for buyer, and vice versa. So unless there is a foolproof mechanism for carbon price setting across the globe, I guess bilateral trading is going to be the winner in the carbon trading pricing game.
Right. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your insight. Thank you so much, sir, for answering this question. My next question is for Mr. 𝐂𝐀𝐑𝐁𝐎𝐍 𝐓𝐑𝐀𝐃. This is basically related to what people have also been asking in the chat. So, what is the size of India's carbon trading market? How does a carbon trading company typically work? And what are the factors driving its growth and some of the challenges that it could run into?
So to understand India's carbon market, we need to understand the global carbon market and its size and potential. So globally, in the past, there had been price slash, and there were some crucial scenarios in carbon markets globally, wherein most of the carbon trading companies and carbon credits investors, they were not making money, and they were not able to sell their inventories completely. But in last 1.5 to 2 years, if we see the trend, there is a steep rise in the carbon credit prices. Globally, in 2021 itself, the voluntary carbon markets, if we see particularly, that hit a record high of $1 billion worth of trading in voluntary carbon markets. Out of which, in India itself, $300 million worth of trading had happened, which is still going on, and large number of carbon credits are being exported out of India. And India being world's second largest developer and supplier of carbon credits, India has that commanding position in the market, wherein India commands a very good number of inventory. Indian projects command a very good number of inventory, which can fulfill the supply of carbon credits globally. The carbon markets, Indian carbon market is going to cross more than $500 million by 2025, and it is poised to become $10 billion worth of industry in India itself. Within India itself, it is going to be 10 billion worth of industry by 2030. As per McKinsey report, the global carbon market is going to be 15-fold, that's going to be a 15-fold growth by 2030, and by 100%, 100-fold growth by 2050. So that is the massive size of carbon market globally, and India has its fair share, and that's a long game in the market. That's what we see. Apart from this, as the question says, how does a carbon trading company work? Basically, a carbon trading company is majorly a consulting company, and as a carbon trading company, our company works in the carbon markets largely in India, and as a carbon credit services provider company, we basically originate the project, we find the project which are eligible to claim the carbon credits, and then we grab such project, we deal with the project owners, we sign the contracts, and we develop such project activities as per the voluntary or compliance market mechanism under whichever registry the project wants to get registered, by following the due processes, and get it audited by the third-party auditors, request the registry for the issuance of credits, and then we source the buyers from international market for the trading of such carbon credits. And there is always a buyer-seller negotiation between the buyers and our project proponents, or sometimes directly with us, and we come to a fair price between both the parties. And then based on the agreements that we have signed, or based on the pre-approved and pre-agreed conditions between the buyer and the project proponent, or sometimes between buyer and us, based on the pre-agreed conditions, we are committed to supply them the desired number of credits, and that's how the monetary transactions also happen. So a carbon trading company is basically an end-to-end service provider, right from the project origination to the supply and monetization of carbon credits. There have been very good companies across India which are doing pretty well in the Indian carbon market, and there are some new startups coming in the carbon field as well. Innovation, if we talk about innovation in the carbon market now, carbon credits are going a step further, wherein carbon credits are now being truly digitized, decentralized, and democratized. And there has been a huge demand of such carbon credits from a section of investors across the globe, which are digitizing and tokenizing these carbon credits under the blockchain. Blockchain technology has its own advantages, wherein you are avoiding the double accounting of carbon credits, wherein once a carbon credit is on blockchain, that cannot be double offsetted or double accounted against a particular use or emission. As well as there have been large funds across the globe which are investing heavily in the carbon markets and converting these carbon credits in the exchange traded funds in terms of green bonds. So the use case for the carbon credits and the horizon, the overall horizon of carbon credits and advantages of carbon credit is increasing. Carbon credit right now is not just a tool for offsetting some parties' excess emission, but it has emerged as a very vast financial tool as well, which can be stored for a better future value amongst the investor circle. So that is one of the benefit where more and more companies are coming in and getting into this work. So factors deriving the growth of carbon markets, that there have been several factors. In Indian context only, if we see, India is one of the largest generator of renewable energy. India has a very vast forest cover as well. And above all, the awareness about the carbon credits and carbon markets, even our local farmers and agriculturists, they are being, continuously, they are being made aware about the agroforestry from which they can earn carbon credits. Industries have been earning out of it since ages. But now there have been efforts wherein indigenous people and the tribal people, they are being aware, being made aware of the benefits out of the carbon credit. Large community development projects which are happening. So looking at these things, the benefit of such carbon credits and carbon markets can reach to the grassroots level people as well, which can give a huge boost to the Indian carbon market globally as well. India is coming up with its own carbon credits market, a regional market. Since Gujarat has recently announced the building of its within the state, it's a state carbon market. So these kind of activities and efforts which government and Indian government and state governments are doing, I guess this is going to increase the better supply of the carbon credits from quality projects. And apart from this, we hope for a better pricing of carbon credits, because there'll be a healthy competition between the project investors as well. And I guess the demand and supply both will be monitored by continuously by putting in such regulatory mechanisms and efforts by the government. So these are the positive sides, but there have been some factors which are affecting it as well. So there have been some projects which has large number of carbon credits, but they are not priced in a better manner. So such kind of things, they spread the negativity about the overall market and the overall environment. Taxation is also one of the prime concerns, because there has been an uncertainty about the tax on carbon credits income. So that is one of the major concern for all the investors these days, because income from carbon, there is a huge demand from a particular section of carbon credit investors, that the income generated from carbon credit needs to be tax-free. So taxation part is also there. The technological disadvantages, because in India, we are still way behind in terms of climate friendly and environment friendly technologies. We do not yet have such access the carbon storage and the carbon capture technologies and the better renewable energy generation efficient technologies. So such technological access that we do not have these days. So that could also be one of the disadvantage. We are not able to harness the full potential of Indian carbon market. If we are having a better mechanism in place, I guess India can surpass China in terms of supply of carbon credits, and we can become the global leader already.
Right. Thank you so much, sir, for your inputs.